Right now, as you're watching this, somewhere between 30 and 40% of adults are dealing with clinically significant anxiety. But here's the more interesting number. Nearly 100% of people, religious or not, calm or anxious, worry every single day about money, about the future, about whether that text message meant something. What if I told you the oldest, most read book in human history already explained exactly why your mind does this, and already gave you a method that modern therapy would later reinvent from scratch? Let's start with what's actually happening inside your head. Worry isn't a character flaw, and it isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It's your brain's threat detection system, the same system that once kept your ancestors alive by scanning the environment for danger. The problem is that system was built for physical threats, a predator in the grass, a storm on the horizon. It was never built for a delayed email reply, an awkward conversation replaying in your head at 2 a.m., or an uncertain diagnosis still weeks away. But your brain doesn't know the difference. It fires the same alarm either way. Psychologists have a name for what happens next: catastrophizing. The mind treating an imagined worst-case scenario as if it's already happening. In real time in your body, your heart rate rises, your muscles tense, your thoughts start looping. And here's the cruelest part. None of that response actually solves the problem you're worried about. It just exhausts you today, in exchange for a future that hasn't even arrived yet, and might never look the way you fear. Have you ever noticed you can spiral through an entire imaginary argument, or rehearse a disaster that never happens, before you've even had breakfast? That's not weakness. That's a very old survival mechanism, misfiring in a very modern world. Here's what's genuinely striking. This exact pattern of thought was described, in precise detail, thousands of years before psychology had a vocabulary for it. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus is speaking to a crowd of people who had real reasons to worry: occupation, poverty, hunger, uncertain harvests. And he says this: "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." Read that again, slowly. That's not a dismissal of anxiety. It's almost a clinical observation about how worry works. Spending today's energy on tomorrow's imagined trouble doesn't protect you from tomorrow. It just taxes you twice for a bill that may never come due. Then there's Paul, writing one of the most quoted passages on this subject from inside a Roman prison, arguably one of the most anxiety-justified situations a person could be in. He writes to the church in Philippi, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Notice that word, God. In the original language, this is military vocabulary, the image of a sentry standing watch at a city gate. Paul isn't describing a vague, wishy-washy calm. He's describing something active, standing between your mind and the next spiral, the way a soldier stands between a city and an approaching threat. And it's not just the New Testament. The Psalms, poetry, written centuries earlier by people in genuine danger, exile and grief, are full of the same rhythm. Name the fear out loud, then deliberately turn toward trust. "When I am afraid, I put my trust in you," says Psalm 56. Not "I don't feel afraid," not "I pretend everything is fine, I am afraid, and here's what I do next." This is where it gets interesting, because modern research on anxiety treatment lines up with this ancient pattern almost exactly. Take cognitive reappraisal, one of the most well-supported techniques in modern anxiety treatment. The idea is simple. A vague, floating sense of dread has enormous power over you, but the moment you name the specific fear, out loud or in writing, it shrinks. It becomes a defined problem instead of an infinite cloud. That's almost word for word what Paul is describing. Present your requests, specific requests, not a vague feeling, is the exact mechanism therapists use today. Then there's the role of gratitude, which Paul includes almost as a side note, with thanksgiving, but which neuroscience has since taken very seriously. Studies on gratitude practices show they can shift activity in brain regions tied to emotional regulation, essentially competing with the threat response system for the same mental real estate. You cannot fully spiral in fear and fully notice something to be grateful for at the exact same moment. The two states compete for your attention, and deliberately practicing one weakens the other. And research on prayer and structured reflection specifically has found similar patterns. Consistent engagement with a slow, repeated practice of naming worries and releasing them is associated with lower reported anxiety and improved emotional regulation over time. None of this proves a miracle. What it shows is that a 2000-year-old instruction, followed as an actual practice, rather than just a nice quote, maps remarkably well onto what we now understand about how anxious minds calm down. So here's how to actually put this to work, broken into 3 concrete steps, because a verse without a practice is just a nice sentence you'll forget by tomorrow. Step 1. Name it specifically. The next time you notice the spiral starting, that tight chest, that racing loop, stop and name the actual worry, out loud or on paper. Not "I feel anxious, but I'm afraid I said the wrong thing in that meeting," or "I'm afraid I won't have enough this month." Specificity is what shrinks the fear from an infinite cloud into a defined, addressable thing. Step 2. Attach one specific thing you're grateful for, in that same moment, not as a way of pretending the fear isn't real, but as a way of interrupting the spiral with something equally real. This isn't toxic positivity. It's a documented way to shift your nervous system out of pure threat mode. Step 3. Hand it off. Whether that's in prayer, in a journal, or in a conversation with someone you trust, the physical or verbal act of transferring the worry out of your own head and onto something outside yourself is the part that actually interrupts the loop. Psychologists call this externalization. Paul called it casting your cares on God. Different vocabulary, remarkably similar mechanism. Try this for 1 week, with one recurring worry. Not every worry, just one. Name it. Attach gratitude. Hand it off. Notice what happens to its size by the end of the week. Your brain isn't broken for worrying. It's running very old software in a very new world. And that's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to work with. The oldest book in the world already understood that struggle, and already handed us a method that psychology would spend thousands of years catching up to. If today's worry feels bigger than you can carry alone, that's worth talking to a counselor or someone you trust about. This video is a starting point, not a replacement for real support when you need it. If this helped you see something differently, subscribe to Scroll and Stone. Every week, we dig up more places where ancient wisdom already knew what we're only now rediscovering.